Welcome to New Horizons. I'm Suzanne Barnett, your host, and tonight I am very, very pleased to welcome my esteemed guest. Dr. Richard A. Blasband is a board-certified psychiatrist who studied medicine and then psychiatry at Yale University. He is a very hot psychiatrist, and wait till you meet him. Dick, Dr. Blasband, thank you so much for being here again. I have to tell the audience that you were here last month, and we had so much to talk about, and the people that saw your, our show said, "Who is that Dr. Richard A. Blasband? Are you going to have him on again?"
Who is that masked man? Yes.
that wild psychiatrist. But in order to tell the audience a little bit about how you got into these two different methods of psychiatry, just if you could refresh what we talked about last month.
Yeah, Wilhelm Reich's work. Yes,
right.
Yes. Yeah, I came upon it through my uncle when I was studying engineering at Cornell. And I became so fascinated by reading Reich's work that I decided I wanted to study with him. And I heard that he would only train physicians, so that's the reason I went to medical school. I gave up engineering and happily went into pre-med training and then studied at Penn and then at Yale in psychiatry. And so it's been almost 50 years that I've been involved with this work, not just as a psychiatrist practicing Reich's method, but also working with other facets of his discoveries. As a psychiatrist, most people don't know this, but Reich was the man who really discovered and brought to the public attention that one could work with the body in psychotherapy. And nowadays it has a whole designation. There are people who are practicing body psychotherapy, as they call it, and there are many different other designations. And most of them don't even know about Reich.
Is that right? Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And for example, I had lunch. I sat down at a counter with a woman who was a therapeutic masseuse who said she did body therapy, and she didn't know the name Wilhelm Reich. It just isn't mentioned for many reasons. But it actually involves working on chronic muscular tensions, which hold emotions back. And the muscular tensions are the equivalent on the psychological side of repression of emotions and ideas. So you can work on one side or the other with the patient and release the emotions, and this helps restore them to health.
Excuse me, what do you mean by one side or the other?
The psychological side of how they behave, walk, talk, and their experiences. Or you can work on the physiological side, which is the chronic muscular tension. And by working on both of them usually, which is what I do, it speeds up the release of blocked emotions.
And you said you don't even, and here you are a physician, that you don't use drugs.
No, I try. I mean, I could if I wanted to.
Yeah.
But I try and steer away from using drugs because they tend to suppress the life energy, its action in the body. And that's really what I'm working with, getting the body to release the immobilization that most people are in and release this energy so that they can live fully again. And drugs block that. So I steer away from them. But, it has to be added that most of the patients who come to see me are probably not people who would need drugs. They're not so severely sick that I would want to give them drugs anyway.
Tell the method that you use, I think, is so hot that your patients come in their underwear.
Well, they don't come in their underwear.
No, they have to change, or they take their clothes off.
I discourage that.
Yeah. Why? Why?
Because I don't want the police at the door.
Oh, I see.
But once they're in the office, then they disrobe down to the underwear, you see.
And then what happens?
They lie on a couch, and we chat for a while, and they tell me about, their life experiences during the week. And I may make some comments about that. And if it's very important, I'll stay with that and get into that, try to help them with something that was negative for them. But once we've done that, then we move into what we call the biophysical work. And that involves deep breathing, which helps build up the energy level in the body. And if they have tension, say in the shoulders, or the throat or the jaw, legs, I'll work on those tensions. And by releasing the tension, it permits the life energy to flow through the body more easily. And when that begins to happen, emotions spontaneously come to the surface. And then the patient and I deal with those emotions, what they're about, how they got blocked, that kind of business.
So would you say that this technique is much faster, quicker than the old time of just, like the Freudian, and which I don't think they use as much, but instead of the patient for years, months, and then years, they have to keep going?
Well, it's so different that it's difficult to compare the two. But in terms of symptomatic relief, it is faster.
That's what I mean, yeah.
But the most important thing about it, as far as I'm concerned, is that it penetrates deeper into the organism. And the person not only loses their symptoms, but they begin to live a totally different kind of life, and they discover who they really are.
So you do think, I don't remember if I asked you this last time. I believe that people cannot change their basic personality.
Well,
what do you think?
As Reich said, once the tree grows crooked, it's hard to straighten it out.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult. But I've seen some amazing kinds of things in people who've gone through this kind of therapy.
Could you give an example?
Yes. There's a young man, he's in his early 40s, who came to me, and he was, and still is in a way, schizophrenic. He wasn't psychotic, but he had a great deal of difficulty making contact with his own feelings and with other people. And he really wasn't doing much work-wise, although he was a very intelligent fellow. And his main problem biophysically was that he couldn't make good eye contact. That is, if you were me and I were he wouldn't look at me. That kind of business.
Yeah.
And that's a means of avoiding feelings that he would have internally if he were to make eye contact with me. So what I did was work on that and had him look at me, breathe deeply, and he would become very frightened whenever he did that. And when he would become frightened, I would tell him to scream in fear, to let it out of his system. And it took him a while before he could do that freely. But once he was able to do that, then he was able to look at me for longer and longer periods of time. And this took a couple of years, so it's not a shortcut, in a sense, to deep change. But after a couple of years of this kind of work, he was able to look at me and to function much better in society and in his work and with himself. Only one problem happened. That was that he began to develop weakness and inability in using his legs and arms.
What happened?
It's simply that the armoring, the tension that he was holding in his brain moved down. It left his brain and settled in the middle of his back and in his lower spine. And many people who knew him thought that he had Parkinson's disease. But he didn't, and I could tell, because in Parkinson's disease, the face gets very rigid, and his was getting looser and more open. And we just continued working, and I would work on the tensions in his back. And as I began to free them up, he felt anger come to the surface, and he wanted to punch and hit the couch, which I encouraged him to do. And as he did that, he began to lose the awkwardness in the use of his hands. And that's where we are now.
So he's still with you?
Yes.
Well, that's pretty dramatic.
Yeah, that's a very dramatic case.
Well, let's get on now with the other healing method. That's really what we wanted to talk about tonight.
Okay.
Okay? Tell about that.
You mean Nikolai Levishov's work?
Yes, yes.
Well, first off, like, who is Nikolai Levishov?
Yeah. Oh, I loved him.
I know you did.
I really did.
Yeah, he was fond of you, too.
Thank you.
Yes. Nikolai, when I first met him, was in his early 30s. Big man, 6'5", possibly close to 300 pounds. I mean, a really big man. Who was probably the most remarkable person I've ever met. He was, by training, a theoretical physicist, trained in Russia, where he was born. And he came to the country maybe just a few years before I met him, which was about 25 years ago. And he started a practice about a year or so before I met him. And the main thing about Nikolai is that he was born with certain qualities that we would call psychic. And he discovered in time that he was different from the other boys. But it wasn't, however, until he got to university that he knew that he was really different from other men. And using the scientific method, he figured out what it is that he did with people and how that could happen. And what he did by then was that he was a healer. He found that he was a healer, and quite a remarkable one. While in Russia, he trained over 300 physicians to be healers. Now, being a healer and training others to do healing are two different things. They're related, but they are quite different. As a healer, and I've known some world-class healers, Nikolai was just remarkable and way, way beyond any of them, particularly because he knew what he was doing. Most healers don't know what they're doing. They know that if they put their hands on somebody and they have the intention of love or helping the person, that changes begin to take place. But what Nikolai discovered about nature and about human beings was far deeper and broader than that. He began to understand that people have energy fields around them, and that these fields contain information. And he was able, with his abilities, to tap into that information. And he could also see inside people's bodies. And he could see disease. And he could go into those diseased areas with his mind and make corrections in them so that healing would begin to take place. And as I say, he was capable of training others in how to do that. People would come to him like physicians and say, you know, I know you're a great healer, Nikolai, can you train me how to do this? So what he did was to examine his own brain. I told you he could see inside bodies, he could see inside himself. And he compared his brain to the brain of the person, say, who wanted to become a healer. And he made changes in that person's brain so they were like his brain. In other words, he could grow tissue here, take tissue away there. So he reconstructed the person's brain. And with that, the energy bodies or energy field that's, surrounds the body and the brain and the tissue. Changes were made in those too. And the person spontaneously became able to heal. And that's what he did with me. He trained me to heal in that way.
Did you need healing?
Oh yes, when I first went to see him, I was suffering from chronic fatigue syndrome of about 10 to 15 years duration.
Really?
Yeah. That's something that I had picked up in the course of working with a discovery of Reich's, an apparatus that affects the weather. And the energies that were pouring through that apparatus were more than my poor old body could handle. So it began to break down.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that about you. Yeah, yeah.
So I went to, a friend told me about Nikolai. So I went to see him, and within minutes, he was able to tell me the state of my organism, whereas it had taken physician friends, hours to come to the same kinds of conclusions. In other words, he was looking in and seeing what was going on. So I decided to go into healing with him. And I immediately knew that he was an extremely powerful healer, because as he began to work on me, just simply standing nearby and moving his hands outside my body, I could feel strong currents of energy pulsing in my body. And after each session, I would be completely wiped out. I'd have to sleep for hours. And the first thing he did with me was to remove toxins. He said I was loaded with toxins in many different organs, and inflammation here and inflammation there. And as he did that, began to remove these toxins, they began to pour out of my brain and down into my nose. Yes, and pus and other noxious fluids began to pour out of me.
Really?
Yes. It was really, I could still function, but I was, wiped out by all of this. And that went on for months until I was, clean. And then I began to, my energy level began to pick up, and I began to feel better. And I found in my own work that everybody has these toxins. They may not have chronic fatigue syndrome, but if they have a chronic illness, they've got these toxins. And the first task that I have as a healer is to remove these toxins from these people.
Well, that's what I want you to talk about. How do you do that?
Well, the first thing I do when I work with somebody is, unless they're sitting right in front of me like you are.
Can you see all my toxins?
If I want to.
Oh, don't look.
Shall I tell them?
No, don't look. Okay, go ahead.
So no matter what the distance the person is, I create a hologram of them. I know what they look like from a picture they've sent me generally, and I can create a hologram in my mind's eye of them. And I can work on this hologram just as if the person were sitting in front of me.
Really?
Really, yes.
And you learned that from Nikolai?
He told me that this is what would happen.
Yeah, I see.
And once he had changed my brain and my energy bodies, that's what happened. As soon as I go into the healing mode, I can see the person as if they're right in front of me, and go into their organism in great detail, even down to the genetic level.
But Dick, how do you do that? I mean, it just seems so impossible.
That's what a student asked Nikolai. Nikolai, this person said, "How come now I can heal?"
Yeah.
And Nikolai said, "How come you can walk?"
It becomes a part of you.
That's right.
It becomes a part of your brain. Yeah.
Becomes a part of my organism.
Of the whole organism.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is something I can do, just like you can walk. I know it's very difficult to believe.
It is.
But there are things that you can do that other people can't. You're probably not even aware of them. But I'll give you a good example, if you like.
Don't talk about my toxins.
I'm not going to talk about you. I wouldn't talk about your toxins.
Okay.
I'm not going to embarrass you.
No. Okay. Go ahead.
Well, there are people who are colorblind, right? Okay. And let's suppose they're colorblind for the color blue, right? And they come to you and they say, "I hear people talking about this color blue, but I don't seem to be able to see it. Can you tell me what it's like?" And, until maybe you'll talk a little bit about purple or a little bit about green, but you're really not talking about blue, which is, its own color, right?
Right.
Okay, so I bear the same relationship to the average person with respect to seeing inside bodies, having that ability, as you do to the person who's colorblind with respect to knowing what colors are.
Yeah.
There are things you can do and see that they can't.
I see what that's a good analogy, really.
Yes, and there are things that I can see and do because I'm trained to that you can't.
That I couldn't possibly.
Well, I won't know about that.
Well,
If Nikolai were here, he could probably change you if you wanted to.
that would be great.
No,
I know.
Easy to say now that he's not here.
I know. We talked about a brain change, and he said something very interesting. He said, if I change my brain, I will see the world in a different way. Is that what I want?
That's right.
And so I thought about it, and I said, no, I guess I'll just stay the way I am.
Mm-hmm.
As screwed up as it is sometimes. No, I'm not. I don't want to talk about myself. So continue about your healing.
What I do, how it works?
About how you do it. Yeah.
Well, I can work with people at any place on earth simply because the physics of this business are not the same physics that exist in most things like this, things that are hard and solid. We're working here with energetic states, and those are changes which are independent of time and space. And therefore, when you get into resonance with somebody, their hologram, or them, say in China, as I've treated people in China.
From their picture?
Yes.
Okay.
When that happens, there's a resonance, let's put it like that. That is, I can affect things in them independent of time and space. And there's a lot of evidence in experimental evidence which demonstrates that average people can do that kind of thing, but on a much lower grade level.
Really? So you don't have to be psychic?
No.
It has nothing to do with it.
No, but although once Nikolai changes you, you do develop psychic qualities.
Like what?
Well, you become much more sensitive. Some people become very telepathic. The ability to heal is a psychic quality, that kind of business. Some people can develop the ability to do psychokinesis, that is, to move things without actually touching them, that kind of business.
This is so difficult to understand and then believe.
Well, think about the person who is colorblind.
Okay.
And now that's not difficult for you, is it?
No.
Why isn't that difficult?
Because I've known some colorblind people.
Yes, yeah, because you've experienced it, and because it's very common in our culture. We know about that, and we accept it, even though we may not understand why they're colorblind, right?
Right.
But we simply accept it because it's been around.
That's right.
And other people accept it. But this is all new for most people.
Indeed.
So it's very hard for them to accept it.
Which do you like practicing better, the Reich or this?
I like them both about equally, and for definite reasons. The Reichian work is with people who are very dedicated to changing their character structure and becoming better people in many different kinds of ways. And I like doing that and helping people to achieve that. And that makes a contribution to society also.
Of course.
The healing work is gratifying in the sense that you're also helping people, but it's on a much more short-term level, unless you're working with chronic fatigue syndrome, which may take several years to help somebody. But most of the time, it's a lesser condition, and it's always gratifying to help people to, feel better. And the fact that I can do it thousands of miles away gives me a kick. I enjoy that.
How long have you been doing this healing?
Over 20 years
Over
now.
20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. How many people are like you, do you think?
Not many.
In the world?
There aren't any.
There aren't any like you?
No,
Because you're such an individual?
No, well, I was just thinking in terms of the work. I'm probably the only one who's trained in both Reich's
see.
work and in Levashov's work.
Yeah. You know what? We're just about out of time.
Oh.
I'm going to have you back again.
Oh, my goodness.
Would you like that?
Well, I'll have to think about that and see if I can teleport my way down here.
That's it. I was wondering about that. No, but you've given us so much information, and why not believe in this? Because obviously it's worked for you,
Well,
and
it's a challenge.
so many people. You've helped thousands of people.
Oh, I wouldn't say thousands, no.
Hundreds?
I would say maybe 1,000.
And you're still a young guy, so look
Hey.
at this. Look at the future for you.
I know.
Anyway, thank you, Dr. Blasband, so much for returning. And I love doing this show with you, and also the other. And I will have you back, okay?
Well, thank you, Suzanne. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And I want to thank our crew. We have, I don't know how psychic they are, but they're very dedicated, and they're very good at what they do. And I always thank them, because without them, we wouldn't have a show. And we're all volunteers. And of course, I would like to thank my audience for watching. What would we do without you? And this is really true from the heart, psychically, if that's true. I can't wait to see you next time. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.